Okay, looks like microphone is working this time. Good. My name is Freeman Michaels, and I wanted to talk about why we should pursue cognitive dissonance. And I feel like a lot of the problems that we have in the world are because we don't understand each other, and that can be whether or not it's gender, skin color, country, whatever. It's every time we get into a situation, it seems like you get this scenario where two people end up yelling at each other, or one person's yelling, the other person's just like, man, I'm gonna let this person finish and then I'm gonna peace out. And that's not a good way to resolve things. You pretty much never get anything done. I'm just checking the microphone. Good. You never get anything done, and you end up just being frustrated. And that's pretty much the case with almost all political conversations that I've seen online. And it happens with other things, but right now politics is really important because things aren't terribly stable in the world, and the people need to be able to talk to each other since the parties don't seem to be doing a very good job. The only change we really need to make is that we need to start listening to each other. And it's easier said than done, but it's really that straightforward. We have to change the goal in our conversation to be from teaching the other person a lesson to assuming the other person has a lesson to teach us, and then ask questions and follow up. What happens though is when you hear about someone else's ideas and worldview, you're like, oh my God, that is crazy. And that especially happens when conservatives and progressives to get together. It's like and when the news that they consume is so different. Right now, people think that there are some Hillary people that think Bob Mueller is going to bring down Trump and everything is going to be great and maybe Hillary will be installed as president. And there are QAnon people who think Trump is a god and is going to do all these great things and is working behind. All these things are going on and we don't really know. And then when two people talk to each other that have these completely different perspectives, it's like they're speaking a different language. They just can't do it. And here's the definition from the interwebs. It's effectively a condition or conflict of anxiety resulting from an inconsistency between one's belief and their actions, such as opposing the slaughter of animals yet eating meat. And for the sake of conversation, I'd like to adjust that a little bit. I think emotional, mental, physical, and experience that one has when an insecure belief system is challenged, and the insecure part is important. I think you can avoid having cognitive dissonance if someone says, well, you oppose the slaughter of animals and you're eating meat. It's like, well, yeah, I may need eat meat to be healthy, yet there's no real good way in this country to get animals that weren't slaughtered like they are. So you can avoid cognitive dissonance with that. But when there's an insecure belief system, so maybe you are insecure about the slaughter of animals, that's when things get a little interesting. Here's a picture or screenshot from Westworld, one of my favorite shows. And there's this android holding a picture. And it's an android lives in this theme park. It's a Western, knows nothing other than this, I think, 1 week keeps repeating. And he's given this picture, I think a tourist left it, and it's a picture of a woman in a city. And another android asks them, well, what does this look like to you? And the android's like, well, it's just a bunch of nothing. And that's a lot of times what we get when we're talking to someone else. That we hear what they think about Trump or what they think about Hillary or Bernie, and we're just like, wow, that's so crazy. You almost tune out and you're just like, it's a bunch of nothing. Or they can say, you're being crazy, you don't believe X, Y, and Z, and you just completely discount them. And it may actually be true, but it really does sound crazy. And with human beings, since we are rationalizers and not rational, it's easy for us to dismiss things. So cognitive dissonance happens when everything you hold near and dear and you're talking about that subject and it's challenged. So here I have a picture of a city, but it's kind of like you're holding the whole world on top of some belief system, whether or not that's religion or government or Democrats or Republican or whatever. Everything centers around you believing this concept. And it is a concept which you may be insecure about. And so when people challenge you on that concept, it then becomes kind of a frightening thing, like, oh my God, I can't articulate why God exists and my whole world revolves around believing in God. Or I cannot articulate why someone should continue voting Democrat because they haven't served our interests and we've been at war for 2 decades. But for them, there's like, well, right now you only have a choice between Democrat and Republican's awful for them. So what do you, it's like, that is right where their worldview leaves them. They only have these 2 choices because any other choice is going to threaten this city. I can't click it. That's too bad. It's going to threaten the city. So it's like it's the foundation of a bunch of buildings that feels like it's going to get ripped out when someone challenges your belief system. And so that's why I have this nuclear explosion in this emoji's head. When you go down that path of like, oh my God, this might be real, what does that mean? That's cognitive dissonance. And that's something I think we should pursue because that means growth. Like I said, everything that you hold near and dear is in some belief system, whether or not that's God, politics, men are this way, women are this way, people with darker skin, whatever. It's the way you move through the world. It's all of your set of confirmation biases. And this is how the world makes sense to you. And it doesn't even have to be politics or something. It could be something as simple as this is how you get your point across. You grab someone's shoulder and talk to them because they have this experience of people running away. So they got to grab their shoulder to keep people's attention. Like people make up rationalizations and stories for what they do. And when something challenges that, that's very scary because this is the way you know the world to be. And if someone's coming along and saying this is how it's, it's not that, here's proof, that's you're like, oh my God, I don't get that. And you can experience it in small doses, like maybe you have to work an extra 5 days and you don't know how you're going to do it, and you just like, oh my God. But then you can get it. You work through it and you get it. And that's like a mini cognitive dissonance. You're like, I can't handle it, but then you handle it. And the nice thing about not running from it, but actually handling it, is that it becomes easier to handle the next time. And then you have an easier time even seeing the problem and avoiding the problem because you've gone through that exercise of addressing it instead of running from it. And what happens today, a lot of times, let's mostly think about politics over here, there's a new idea that comes along. And someone presents you this new idea, and it seems like you just say, oh, here's a new idea, let's try it, let's think about it. But that's not what happens. Someone challenges MMT or UBI or guns or whatever, and all of a sudden it becomes an experience. So there's this protective barrier that we have going on. Mostly it's emotions and ego. People like to break it down in different ways. But emotions, like you're afraid that if Bernie does this, then Hillary's not going to win, or Trump is going to win. So these emotional things get in the way of, here's a new idea, let's analyze it and talk about it. And this one happens a lot more with men, but it's certainly not limited to men, but the ego. This is where it shows up a lot of times when you're having conversations, someone posts a comment, and someone else is like, you know what, I'm going to teach this person a lesson. It's like that happens all the time because I know I'm the one that has a lesson to teach and the other person just needs to listen, and if they would just listen, things would be okay. And that ego is what's preventing the person from listening. Like they literally are not listening because they wouldn't ask a question, so their mind isn't open, and they come at the situation where I have this to teach you, and there's nothing you can do about it because their mind's not open. So that protective barrier happens pretty much all the time. Between those two, that's where politics dies. But if you can get past that, there's still another protective barrier, and that's the worldview. That's the way you've made sense of the world. A lot of times with politics, Democrats bad, Republicans good, or vice versa. There's no way you can change someone's mind easily with that because they have a whole set of facts and events and stuff that have made up their mind. They have things that probably go back to their childhood. Well, you have to care about people this much, or you have to try this hard and be this independent. And those are things that you can't easily change. So even if you get past their emotions and their ego, they still might not have an open mind enough to try and adjust their worldview. Usually to get that far, you have to establish trust, which means doing the opposite of what you pretty much see with every political conversation, where it's, talking at the person. Here's what I think you should know. You know this. You have to establish trust so the other person can feel comfortable saying what they have to say without being beaten back. And this happens a lot with progressives. Conservatives will say something and we're like, well, you're just racist or you're just this. Well, maybe they don't believe in that governmental policy. And I think a lot of times there definitely are racists on both sides. But it dumbs down the conversation to just bring up your issue. You're like, well, you're being racist with this policy. You have to establish trust that the other person can feel safe enough talking to you and telling you about all of their confirmation biases and worldviews. Oftentimes people don't even realize that theirs is that much different than yours. They just assume the world operates the same way they do, or the world should. So it's not like someone can say, well, here's my worldview, here's what's different than yours. It doesn't work that way. But once you start getting that trust, and you can get to see how the person thinks and how they view the world. And if you want to keep yourself a little detached, just pretend that their world is a fantasy world and you're trying to learn from it. Instead of teach it, like, well, no, you're wrong about this. Try and say, well, you know what? I want to learn what makes this person tick. Because a lot of times people come from such different ideas, especially conservative and progressive, that you just don't even know how to talk to each other. And especially with conservatives and progressives, it's like we talk a different language. Conservatives are way more about structure, and progressives, when our back against the wall, we like to stand up for the little guy. Here was a funny thing. It just happened this morning on Twitter. It happens all the time. Jared Beck, he's the guy that filed the DNC lawsuit. And I don't know who Janet is. But there was some irrelevant argument, and Janet's response was, a Bernie bro, why am I not surprised? Well, clearly there's no intellectual curiosity there. Janet's not trying to learn about Beck. And in Beck's response, a fluoridated and confused Hillbot, color me not shocked. So here we have two completely different worldviews. They both think the other one's crazy, and neither one's really curious. So what is going to happen here in terms of understanding? Well, nothing. I'm not blaming either one. I don't know Janet, but I'm especially not blaming Jared. It's not that it's this kind of his shtick, but it's a lot of these political conversations are just ridiculous. So the fact that he's calling someone a fluoridated, confused Hillbot and the other one's a Bernie bro, that's kind of par for the course. Now, why would you want to pursue cognitive dissonance? I mentioned earlier that nothing gets done when you're just talking at each other. Both of your minds are closed. And there's another reference I want to make with Westworld, and that is when the androids weren't being visited by guests, by human beings, they still continued to talk to each other. But they kind of had limited roles. The bartender would just ask the same old questions over and over again, and the piano player would always say the same things. And when the humans weren't there, they would continue doing their roles, but for no reason, because they're not really all that conscious. They're just playing out the patterns that they've been programmed to do. And I feel like a lot of these conversations where you're like, oh man, I've had this before, or this person just doesn't understand, that's kind of like what's going on in Westworld. There's this unconscious conversation going on where you say the same thing over and over again and the other person just doesn't get it, and vice versa. In order to get to that point, though, you have to kind of be challenged to the point where you have nothing else. You don't know what to say. And this is maybe a little cruel, but these are a picture from the Hillary people on 2016 election night. I feel like they experienced some major cognitive dissonance in 2016. Most people, all the media was convinced that Hillary was going to win. They were walking the walk like Hillary was going to win. And to deal with the fact that someone like Trump beat someone like Hillary, and in their eyes, Hillary is a feminist icon, a strong woman, and Trump is a bigoted, racist, sexist. The fact that someone could, their feminine hero, could lose to Trump is too much. That doesn't make sense. And of course, the difference is there that most people don't see Hillary the way they see Hillary. But their cognitive dissonance, they don't understand because they see Hillary in a certain way, and it just doesn't make sense otherwise. So why pursue it? Like if you were feeling down like they were in this lower left picture, why would you want to pursue that? Why would you want to explore these feelings? Why would you want to figure out what they're all about? I think it makes you kind of like a superhero. Once you learn these lessons, then it becomes easier to handle similar situations in the future. And the lesson's not how to handle an election loss. The election is what went wrong. Why were you so surprised? Because I wasn't. So I was a little surprised at how easily Trump won, but I wasn't surprised that people didn't like Hillary. That didn't surprise me, and it surprised a lot of the Hillary supporters. So there's a cognitive dissonance there where they experience, oh my God, how could it be possible that Hillary is losing? And if they don't take that next step to explore why, then you don't learn anything, you don't grow. And I would challenge all the people who have been blocking on Twitter left and right, that's probably what's going on there. That's what's going on with Jared Beck and Janet V. They just don't, they're not, it's almost like they're not in the same reality. They are reading completely different news. They have completely different views of the political parties, completely different views of Trump, completely different views of Bernie, completely different views of voting and what you should do. That's why they can't understand each other too much. So here's the how. How to pursue cognitive dissonance. Other than the fact when you're feeling it, then you should dive into it. But it's really hard to recognize when you're feeling it. And this was a scene from Star Wars, where Obi-Wan is asking this weird reptilian dude some questions, and the guy said, I think his name is Dex, the guy says, well, you're a Jedi, you should know the difference between knowledge and wisdom. And knowledge is, we all know we should choose love over fear, we all know we shouldn't be jerks, and we all know we should listen more. But the wisdom comes when we are recognizing our behavior and that we're not doing that. And what we really need, and what is critical, is we need curiosity. And I feel like we've lost a lot of curiosity in this world. I don't feel like our school system and our government, our social media environment, the business environment, nothing really encourages curiosity. At least not curiosity for curiosity's sake. And if someone disagrees with you, someone says, well, I think Hillary is fantastic, try and have an honest conversation and see what they see that makes them feel that Hillary actually is fantastic. And you don't have to agree. Again, the goal isn't to get them to change their mind. Your goal should be to try and understand them. And then when they say something that you disagree with, and you hear their whole story, you really want to soul search. This is a quote I saw at Burning Man, what am I pretending not to know? And this one, to me, kind of goes at the heart of a lot of it. What we do, we are rational. We are not rationalizers. It's easy for us to just pretend like something doesn't exist. Like, we know voting doesn't really work. We know the Democrats aren't really good, but we're going to pretend like we're going to just keep trying and that maybe this time it'll be different. And what am I pretending not to know? That is your soul lying to your human psyche. Your human psyche says, I'm great, I'm just fine. But your soul knows. And that comes from the insecure belief system. Like your soul can't lie to itself. It already knows. But what you can do is just kind of ignore it and then move forward in your human experience. Now, this curiosity, you want to be curious about what you're lying to yourself about. And you want to be curious how other people view the world. Because once you start to be able to handle all these other crazy things. Once you start to be able to you see all these other worldviews. You don't have to agree with them. Be like, well, that's how Hillary people view the world. That's how Bernie people view the world. This is how women view the world. All these other groups, once you start to be aware of how they view the world, you can be empowered, because it will be a lot easier to get things done that you want to get done. You don't have to sit there and wonder, why does this person not like me, or why is this not responding this way? Things become a lot more obvious because you actually understand them at their core. In addition to trust being established and they feel like they can talk to you, and then solutions come up when you are actually communicating in that manner, as opposed to arguing and yelling. Really, it is the changing your entire conversational goal. You do not want to be going and trying to educate someone. That's the wrong approach. You can ask questions, throw out little disagreements and whatnot, but if you see someone disagree, don't go and try and educate them on how. If you see someone post something that you disagree with, don't try and educate them on how they're wrong. Ask them how they are right. Try to make it your goal to understand how they could be right. Try to figure out their perspective. And if it's challenging to your worldview, it's like, oh my God, it's going to threaten my belief in Democrats or Republicans and government, God and capitalism, whatever it is, set that aside and just say, this other person's crazy, and I'm going to learn their crazy worldview. I think you'll find that they're not crazy, but instead it's just people move through the world differently, and it's quite fascinating. Some of the tools would be this. It's a super old book. It might even be almost 100 years now. How to Win Friends and Influence People. This book basically walks through standard conversations and how to ask questions, and it's really helpful. It's a super easy read, but it's really helpful to see where you make mistakes see where you're not being curious about the other person in your own conversation. A lot of times you can hear all the words, but you need the examples to really let it sink in. And once you have the tools of asking questions as opposed to educating people, A New Earth, I really liked it. It kind of addresses the ego, and it's kind of, wow, I don't know how to describe that book, but I recommend it. It's a way to separate yourself from the human experience and have kind of a broader picture look at your life. Here's an example of, I posted on Sam Ronan's wall. Sam Ronan said, this guy's a dipshit. He believes Soros funds something and that guns are the people of the militia. Something like that. Basically, he cut and pasted this other guy's screenshot and said, this guy's a dipshit. So I responded with, I agree with that dipshit. And then we had one back and forth where I clarified that I don't agree with the guy's negative comments, but in general, I think the people are the militia, and I think George Soros does, like a lot of other billionaires, fund things that we don't like. I don't think he pays people to protest, but I think he helps generate angst that drives the protests, and I think he would help fund protests if there was the angst there. And that's kind of a conservative thing. A lot of conservatives talk about that stuff. That's not a progressive thing. And the progressives, a lot of the response is, well, where's my Soros check? I think, well, you didn't ask follow-up questions. You didn't listen. You weren't curious. And like this guy, Christopher Cavallo, he didn't ask me anything. He just tried to educate me with that long paragraph. It's not really quite relevant there. And when your belief system gets challenged and you feel threatened, people a lot of times walk away. In a debate, you can't really walk away, but online you can. And unfortunately now, Sam defriended me. So we're no longer friends. That probably won't happen again. I won't comment on his wall. But the good news is that I'm still friends with his girlfriend. Only because I post about cryptocurrency, though. So I call that a win. That's pretty much it for pursuing cognitive dissonance. As a summary, you really, again, change your entire conversational goal. And one easy way to do it is when you're chatting with someone online, only ask follow-up questions about trying to understand them, and never try to say, this is what you should think. Because it turns out it's kind of like saying, I'm an alcoholic. If you say it out loud, then it solidifies it. And likewise in a conversation, if somebody doesn't ask, their mind is actually not open. Like that guy that wrote that book as a response to me. Here it is, the Christopher. My mind wasn't open to, I feel like I already know what he thought. It's the standard, I've had that conversation before. But I wasn't open to what he was saying. I didn't ask. I wasn't curious. And when you come in and just assume that someone needs to hear this stuff, and you're not listening to what they're saying, that's like that first screen where you had those two people yelling at each other. So change your entire conversational goal to be trying to understand the other person as opposed to trying to teach the other person. And once the other person feels heard and understood, that's really what human beings want. We want to be heard and understood. Then they'll start being curious about you. Then they'll start asking you questions because they trust you. This is another sign, the lower left is another sign I saw at Burning Man, a quote I saw at Burning Man. The only way out is through. If you are afraid to address something and you run from it, it's still going to be there. You have to address it at some point, otherwise it's not going to ever be addressed. It's like when someone keeps dating the same type of person. Like, wow, I didn't learn my lesson. What a surprise. You have to learn your lesson. Otherwise, the universe is going to keep coming back and giving it to you again. And depending on how quickly you need to learn that lesson, the louder the universe will respond. This is a lot of times alcoholics, you lose your friends, you lose your wife, your kids, your job, and everything. And finally you hit rock bottom. You're like, oh my God, it's too painful. I have to change. And the universe will keep giving you that message. If you, instead of waiting for it to be rock bottom, you could take a slightly more conscious approach. And that is to change your entire conversational goal, be curious, ask questions, ask follow-up questions. And the more you learn about other people, the more you will learn about yourself. And the same questions that you're asking yourself, I would say asking other people, I would say challenge yourself. A lot of times what I like to do is, if I think I know a policy, can I explain it in English? Because that or whatever language, for me it's English. But can I articulate why I think what I do? Can I articulate why I think voting is a waste of time, or calling your congressman is a waste of time? Or can I articulate why I don't think capitalism is sustainable? And having that security that you can say, this is what I believe, that will make your insecure beliefs less secure. And you won't be as emotionally challenged when someone says that they don't like capitalism or they don't like government. This will give you superpowers. This will make it such that you can have these political conversations. You can learn about other people without losing your shit, without defriending, without blocking, and all this stuff that goes on with political conversations. It is so empowering to be able to understand someone else and not feel your belief structure threatened. And that is why we should be pursuing cognitive dissonance. Let me see if there's any questions I need to respond. Oh, looks like we're good. Hi, everybody. Alrighty. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys later.